Today's episode is presented by LodeStar, the fee experts.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's special episode of Lending Leaders. Today we have a special guest, Brian Popek, longtime friend of mine, college friend, and something almost as rare as someone who works in the lending space, a home buyer in 2023. So this is something that we did early on when we started the podcast and haven't really had a home buyer on frequently. But just given the state of the market, I just really want to get that perspective because we talk about real estate and buying homes so much, and I just wanted to, actually get a boots on the ground, consumer perspective from it. So, Brian, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, of course, glad to be here. Been a long-time listener and watcher, and now finally part of the show.
There you go. You were only voluntold a little bit to join, so I appreciate your enthusiasm around it.
Exactly.
So let's preface this a little bit too. Before we kind of get into the home buying process. You were 38 years old, to blow up your spot here, talk about your age. You recently bought your second house with your wife, 2 kids, Cassandra, Parker, and Braden. Hey, everyone. And in Connecticut. So one of the things I want to stress too is you are someone I consider to be very financially literate, right? You have a business degree, you've worked as a trader, you work in finance. What else am I missing?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I do have a finance degree. I've worked in the financial markets. Right now I'm working in the insurance industry. I've gone through the home buying process once before, so I have a little bit of context, but it was definitely a different experience. Yeah. And, I like to say I'm aware of what's going on in the markets with interest rates and things like that.
So you probably know enough to be dangerous when buying a home.
Exactly. Yes. For better or worse.
Yep. Yeah. And that's really what I want to kind of explore, right? Because I know you are not alone of folks I know, friends of ours who are, financially savvy in personal finance, but home buying is just a different kind of animal for them. So let's see, I think you moved right around December. So let's walk through, when did you decide, okay, we want to move, let's start looking for a house?
So we actually started looking. We looked at our first house in March 2023. So we took a look and, we'd kind of had it in the back of our mind, and we saw a house come up, and it was something that we said, we should actually go look at this.
Okay.
And, Cassandra will joke and say that it was the worst house to look at first because it was everything we wanted.
Yeah.
And we were never not in a position to, to really do anything on it. But it was enough to get us out the door.
Right.
And, we looked at it, in the market that we were in at that point, it was, you list your house, highest and best offers within 3 days.
Yeah.
And you're basically, having to make a decision there and on the spot.
Yeah.
And so we, the house was on the higher end of our budget. We put an offer in.
This was still the first one.
Still the first house. And, it went, $40,000 over asking.
Wow.
And so, we didn't win it, which I think worked out well for us in the long run. We're happy where we are now. But, it just kind of got us into that situation. All right, this is what the market's like. And, one of the things, as we were going through this, we probably went to, 2 dozen houses, 2 dozen showings, was that, there was one house we looked at. The feedback we got after the fact was there were over 45 showings, over 23 offers on the house.
Yeah.
And, we're sitting there going, how do we become that highest offer? How do we become the most attractive offer? Not even the highest, right? Yeah. There's, the issue we had was that we had a Hubbard clause, or the contingency to sell our house.
Right.
The last thing we wanted to do was put our house on the market, knowing it's going to sell in 4 days.
Yeah.
And then,
so you didn't even think about listing your house at this point, right? You wanted to at least get an offer accepted?
We wanted an offer accepted.
Yeah. And were you working with a realtor that you found through the first house? Like, what was the realtor situation like throughout this?
Yeah. So the realtor we were working with was somebody from the first house. Cassandra, had reached out to them, looked for a showing. They kind of set us up. And next thing you know, we're in a 3-month agreement with this realtor. And she was very green. didn't have a whole lot of insight into the environment there.
Yeah.
And, we were really hoping to lean on her to help guide us with our, bidding and process there. And, just basic things. The market was crazy. It's hard to find comps. The houses we were looking at, comps, you could see things $100,000 over. It was
what
crazy.
Good is a comp when 50 people are bidding for a house, right? The comp is what the market's going to bear, and it's tough.
Exactly. So, we
got it.
We ended.
What was her advice on how to stand out from those, 25, 30, however many other offers?
Her advice was, you just got to sell your house. You gotta list your house, have it sold,
preferably through me, right?
Exactly. Yes, have the house sold, and then you remove that contingency, and hopefully you have a strong offer. And we didn't want to be in that boat.
It happens fast enough that you don't have to live at a hotel.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And what's the likelihood of us beating out those 20 other people?
Right.
And that was the side we didn't want to be on. Right. Especially with two young kids, and we had things we could fall back on, but it's not really the position we wanted to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And so we then, after that contract expired, we were working with another realtor from an agency. So
this got us to about June.
Yeah, exactly, to June there.
Still looking for houses. Haven't listed a house yet.
No, have not listed a house.
Haven't listed your house. Okay.
The agent.
Were there offers during this time that you were putting in that 3-month period?
We put probably a dozen offers on houses.
Wow.
And, the feedback we got was sometimes we were the highest bidder, but because of that contingency to sell our house,
interesting.
Why risk that from the, seller's perspective? And I totally agree with that. There's a lot that could go wrong. They don't know us.
Right.
They're trusting that we can sell our house.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the realtor that, had been on the other side of that, the seller's realtor, had sold the house, next to us on many of these, knew our neighborhood, was very familiar with it, knew that the house would sell, instantly. Yeah. But again, how do you convey that to your client? Yeah, don't mitigate that risk.
Especially when they have the choice. When someone going to buy a house has a bunch of offers that hey, maybe I'll just take the one that is cash and doesn't have this problem.
Is an extra, $1,000, $2,000 really going to, eliminate that risk? And no, from my perspective as a seller, no, not at all.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, we went through that process multiple times.
Yeah.
And, we looked at the day we looked at the house we're in now. We looked at one other house that day, and we said, let's look at this house. It's been on Zillow, every realtor's favorite thing, Zillow. It's been out there, for several months.
Yeah.
Which means something's wrong with it, right? If it's not listed in 4 days, something's wrong.
Yeah.
But the price had come down and down and down. And, we said, let's take a look. And we actually fell in love with the house. And the concerns that I think people had was, the decor, definitely a little dated.
Yeah. That stone wall behind you is screaming 1970s to me, which it reminds me of my grandparents' house.
There you go. It's actually, it's the fireplace, the back end of the fireplace there.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And, but, it's got the red oak, the brass knobs.
Yeah.
And then another potential issue is that there's some cracking in the foundation. And out here in Connecticut, there's a big issue with crumbling foundations. There's actually a state of emergency here. And it's just a red flag for everybody. And unfortunately, fortunately, I know what to look for on crumbling foundations. My parents' neighborhood is subject to this. And the cracks in these foundations were not indicative of a crumbling foundation, but just stress, cracks. And so we were able to comfortably take that risk and saying, all right, this is not a house that needs to, be addressed. It's something that we can do easily.
Yeah.
And so we put an offer out, a lowball offer, and we actually got a response back saying, let's try to meet in the middle. So we had some quick, back and forth. The next thing you know, we're on the hook to buy this house. So it happened very quickly, and it was just
when was that? Was that July, August by that point?
This was actually right before Thanksgiving at this point.
Okay. So you started looking in March, dozen offers, and then you finally got your offer accepted.
Yeah, we'll say mid-November.
Yeah. Right. So, wow. Yeah.
And then with that, we also had a contingency that, we would, sell our house within a month. Yeah. And so, we went into the scramble to, continue purging our house, making it
Yeah.
all look as good as we could.
Yeah.
And and so that was our next scramble there.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And
And
then, so what was the experience like then going and actually listing your house? And you did these both with the same realtor?
so we use the same realtor,
Okay.
and we're very comfortable with, very knowledgeable,
Mm-hmm.
and familiar with their situation, understood what was going on, knew we needed a quick turnaround. We had a showing. We basically
Mm-hmm.
were giving people 3 days to put their highest and best offer in.
Yeah.
This one couple came in. They said,
Mm-hmm.
look, we have this offer, basically good for today. It was right around what we were looking for.
Yeah.
It was essentially a cash offer. They were coming from an
Mm-hmm.
apartment. They didn't have any contingency to sell their house.
Right.
And it was the first offer we actually looked at, and we took it.
Mm-hmm.
So it worked out, for us. Maybe we left a couple $1,000s on the table, but you know what? It was easy. We didn't have to worry
Right.
about it.
It sounds like
And
you did well on the other end too with the
exactly.
purchasing of the property. So, mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly. So,
Yeah.
I think it worked out
Mm-hmm.
very well for us. The interesting thing, though, was the timing
Mm-hmm.
of this. So when we started looking, rates were elevated,
Right.
and in that 6+ range.
Yeah.
And by the time we started, to have to close on our house, our
Right.
rates, the rates were over 7%. So
Mhm.
that buying power had come down.
Mhm.
The
Because
value,
you
or
probably went through a few rate lock periods, right, throughout all of this. That was my next question of how you engaged with a lender, how you were talking to them about the seller contingency.
yeah. So we had gone through basically with a pre-approval the whole way through,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of kept it open in that regard. And then once we had that actual closing date in mind, that's when we locked our rate in.
Mm-hmm.
So we almost timed the top, almost. Good financial literacy there.
Yeah.
But it's it was it still fit within our budget. And I think the other thought that was critical to us was,
Mm-hmm.
rates are high now. Maybe that's helped take some people out of the market, which I think was true on some of the houses we were bidding on.
Mm-hmm.
And we can get in at this price, and hopefully in a couple of years we can refinance at a lower rate.
Mm-hmm.
And if we wanted,
you date the rate, you marry the house.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So the other side was, we could wait a couple of years for rates to come down, but at that point,
Prices,
home appreciations are going to go up, so it doesn't put us in a better spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And with your mortgage, did you look at a 30-year mortgage? Did you look at any other types of mortgage kind of vehicles going through that?
Yeah, I mean, so we were looking at a 30 and a 20-year mortgage,
Mm-hmm.
and then just with the rates going up, we locked in a 30-year rate.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So we're hoping we'll be able to refinance that one, come down. At the start of the year, rates
probably within a year or two would be my bet.
Oh,
but-
exactly. Rates actually almost came down enough to do that before our first payment. So, yep.
Hey, it could be a lot worse. So tell me about the seller of your current house. You said it was, from kind of the 1970s. Had they been there for a long time? Is it
So actually,
a baby boomer? Like, who's selling houses right now?
Right. So the house was actually built in 92.
92.
And second owner,
Mm-hmm.
they had been there since 96.
Okay.
And so older woman, she'd been widowed. Just too large of a house for her.
Yep.
And she had listed it, trying to, just, seeing how home prices being up, wanted to get out of it. It was the right time for her.
Yeah.
And, she's at that point in her life where she, just doesn't need the house. She's using probably, a small portion of what the whole house is, and doesn't want to deal with the maintenance of it.
Yeah.
So she was very motivated to sell, especially having had the house on the market for a couple months.
Was she staying in the area? Was she moving out of the area, downsizing, I assume?
No, yeah. So great question. She was downsizing. She was moving to a 55+ community. Just kind of looking for those types of things in her life.
Yeah.
And
okay.
It was, nice, it was, from her perspective, it was nice to see a new family coming in, taking it into the house, and going to be using it. Really taking advantage of everything the house had to offer.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense, and I think it kind of shows how tricky the dynamics are of, people need to have a house to buy in order for them to move, and even despite high interest rates, people want to move. Life stuff happens where you need more space or you need less space. So I think it's interesting to see kind of all of those dynamics kind of
Oh,
play out.
exactly.
At any point, because I don't know how aware you are of kind of some of the changes around realtor commissions that happened over the last few months. Was that ever in the back of your head? Did that ever come up in working with your buyer's realtor, your seller's realtor?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So in the back of my mind, I always kind of
Hmm.
assumed like a 6% commission on
Yeah.
this, sale of our house, and
Hmm.
we got it down to 5.5%. It kind of killed me
Yeah.
because I knew the house was going to sell one way or the other.
Right.
But you know,
Mhm.
it was just a cost of doing business, and
And at that point, was it just like we have a contingency? We know we need to sell this at a certain period of time.
exactly, and it
Yeah.
just takes all that burden out of there,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
a smaller price
Right.
to pay for that comfort, not having to deal
Yeah.
with it. And our realtor was on top of everything in
Yeah.
constant communication,
Yeah.
it's just the stuff we wouldn't want to have to deal with.
Yeah. No, I mean, it makes sense, and you probably work it into the price anyway. So that's just part of
Exactly.
the cost of doing business, like you said.
Yep.
Hmm. So having this be the second house that you got, obviously it seemed like the finding a home process was a lot harder this time. What do you find confusing or frustrating about the home buying process?
Yeah, great question. So the
Hmm.
first house we bought was actually a new construction home.
Yeah.
So we didn't work with a realtor. It was very straightforward. We're going right to the
Yeah.
builder,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
sign our name on there and we're done.
Yeah.
This time around, like you said, there was definitely a lot more work on trying to find that right house,
Yeah.
going through the whole bidding process,
Hmm.
even through, the mortgage process there, really understanding all the different fees, all the different,
Yeah.
components of it, whether it's, title searches or
Hmm.
what rate point, reductions, what
Why am I
different,
buying points? Yeah.
yeah. And, the different programs that are out there to try to get you to, work with them. Obviously, there's not a lot of inventory. All of these lenders want your business and they're, trying to, cut their fees however they can. So it's really trying
Yeah.
to understand, all right, you're saying you're giving me this. Where does it flow through
Yeah.
on this side of things?
Hmm.
And it
And
was
did you
just,
stick with the original lender that you had your current mortgage with? Did you work with a new lender?
we did. So
Hmm.
we had used our lender to buy our first house. We
Yeah.
refinanced through them. This
Hmm.
time around, we said, all right, we'll get the pre-approval. We can always shop around later.
Yeah.
We ended up working with them.
Hmm.
It was one of those larger national chains, and
Sure.
we had a pretty poor experience with them, truthfully.
Yeah.
And we
But
were
this is
about
now the third mortgage transaction you've done with
correct. The other
whoever
two had
this
been
is.
great.
Yeah.
This one,
Right.
the underwriter, the individual we were working with was great, but when it got to the underwriting department, just a lot of confusion on their end,
Yeah.
and it was just a lot of undue headache. And
Yeah.
it actually had gotten to the point so bad that another lender that we had been evaluating had reached out to
Hmm.
them, 2 weeks before our closing date, saying, "Hey, could you guys pull this through and come through to us, with us?"
Yeah.
And they said they could, but my
Yeah.
wife kind of felt that things, Cassandra felt things were too far along, didn't really want to upset the apple cart there, and we were able to
Yeah.
get it done.
With well, glad to hear that, right? But so
Yep.
was there much shopping around then when you said you were planning on it, or was it more like once you had that offer signed, you're like, we just need to move with this. We need to focus on selling the house.
Yeah, speed was the main thing there. So
Yeah.
we had evaluated a few different things, but I think it was just
Yeah.
speed, convenience. That's what kind of led us there. And then we know that we're planning to refinance at some point, and that we'll kind of dig in a little deeper
That's when
there.
you switch the lenders. Yeah. Figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yep.
If you're going to be paying a premium now, regardless, let's look when the, things are better.
Right. Our thought
Okay.
was, keep points to a
Yeah.
minimum. Let's just get the lowest, rate we
Yeah.
can. And
Okay.
everything seemed to be comparable.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
easy.
Makes sense. Last question I have. What advice would you give to anyone looking to buy a house right now?
I think that's a great question. You got to be
They're not all
persistent.
great questions. I understand you're complimentary
Yeah,
here. They're not all great questions. So
no, it is. I mean, different ways that you can try to
Mm-hmm.
differentiate yourself.
Yeah.
If there's
Mm-hmm.
still 15, 20 people bidding on houses, how do you stand
Right.
out? And
Right.
I think it's just through our constant bidding on houses that we liked. The
Yeah.
sellers agents kind of got to know us. They understood that we usually had
Yeah.
strong offers.
Yeah.
Our mortgage lender usually would follow up with them, let them know, what a
Yeah.
good candidate we are. Um, you know, some people say
Mm-hmm.
write a letter, make that personal connection
Yeah.
there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just for us, it was trying to be flexible
Yeah.
and, saying, all right, we know we have this contingency to sell our house, but we're willing to list it the
Yeah.
day after you guys accept it. We
Right.
have the photos taken. It's all ready to go.
Yeah. And also you just kind of found the warts you were willing to live with, right? Which I think is important. My home buying experience was similar of like, hey, we know this house has been on the market for a while. We understand why, and that's okay with us.
Exactly. It just,
Mm-hmm.
there's things, the layout's great. There's aesthetic things, we'll probably change over time, but
Yeah.
it's nothing that prevented
Yeah.
us from moving in.
Yeah.
So,
Great. Well, I think, I really enjoyed this perspective, really enjoyed hearing about the experience. It definitely makes me nervous for our buy and sell house experience when we get there in the coming years. So, but really appreciate you coming on and sharing the journey with us.
well, of course, it was a pleasure, Jim.
Cool. Thanks.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening.